The hammer fell with a loud bang. Sarah stood near the stage wearing her best red jacket, her hand touching her husband Mike's shoulder. She laughed quietly like a bird singing in the morning. "Say goodbye to your house," she whispered so others couldn't hear. "Someone new will water your flowers now." I stayed quiet. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to LaTonya Burke from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. I looked around the big room. The metal chairs in rows, the man with slicked hair holding the microphone, people talking softly, the smell of floor cleaner and burnt coffee. The woman next to me held a shiny booklet with my kitchen window on the front page. Number 12, it said in big letters. Cozy cottage needs new paint and fixing. The selling hadn't begun yet. They didn't think I would come, and they sure didn't think I would try to buy. I was supposed to sit at home quietly like a book nobody opens anymore. But I wasn't a book. I was still breathing, and I was about to show them how strong my voice could be. That story starts earlier. 3 weeks ago, I was folding clean clothes in my bedroom when I saw a thick white envelope mixed in with the grocery store flyers. No name on the back. I almost put it in the trash, but something about how crisp it felt made me stop. Inside was a notice for a public house sale. A tiny line at the bottom caught my eye. Number 1222 Maple Street. That was my address. I sat down slowly, the paper shaking in my hands. It had to be wrong, but I read it 3 times. My house, my name, and underneath in typed letters. Sale allowed under legal papers. I remembered when she asked me to sign those papers. Just to help out, Sarah had said, all smiles and worry. In case something bad happens and I need to help you fast. Doctor visits, paying bills. It was last winter when I was getting better from slipping on ice. I had said yes, trusting her. She was my daughter. I never thought she would use those papers like this. I called her right away, my voice tight. "Sarah, I got something strange in the mail today." She waited. "Oh, what's that?" "An auction notice with my address on it." A moment of quiet. "Oh, that," she said finally. "I was going to tell you. That house is too big for you. You can't take care of it anymore." "It's my house," I said. "I know, but it's not safe. And honestly, it's money that could help everyone." Could barely breathe. "Help who?" She sighed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll love Sunset Gardens. They cook for you, wash your clothes, and you get your own small garden." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "You already signed the papers," she reminded me. And then with a final voice, "It's already decided." I couldn't sleep that night. I walked through every room like I was already a ghost. I touched the piano my husband once played every Sunday. I smoothed the lace curtains I bought in 1985 when we painted the walls blue. My life wasn't something to throw away. My memories weren't garbage to be swept up. The next morning I made 2 phone calls. One to a lawyer, one to the bank. I had money saved up. Not millions, but enough. Enough to make my point clear. And now here I was, sitting in row 6 in my Sunday dress with my purse next to me, watching my daughter smile proudly as the man with a microphone stepped forward. He started with the smaller houses. I waited patiently. Number 1, number 5. A few sales, some quiet clapping. Then number 12, a sweet little cottage on Maple Street. I saw her sit up straight. She leaned forward, waiting for someone to raise their hand. Anyone except me. The man opened the buying, and I raised my hand. My number steady in the air. The sound in the room changed. People whispering in confusion. My daughter turned sharply, eyes wide like saucers. "Mother," she said, stepping toward me. But I was no longer the quiet woman who signed papers without asking questions. I said nothing. The buying continued, and I kept my number raised high. The house wasn't fancy. It didn't have marble counters or a famous address, but it was mine. We bought it in 1978 when we still believed the world was kind and forever meant something real. I was 30, Robert was 32, and we had just enough money saved to pay the first payment with shaking hands and hopeful hearts. The neighborhood was simple back then. A group of small homes with screen doors that squeaked in summer and sidewalks with cracks in winter. But it had a huge oak tree in the front and a porch big enough for 2 chairs, and that was perfect for us. Robert put up the mailbox himself. It leaned to the right for 15 years until I finally made him fix it. It's got character, he used to say, patting it gently. Just like us. We raised Sarah in that house. She was born on a warm May morning, and I still remember the sunshine coming through the baby room curtains. I sat in that room with her sleeping on my chest and thought, this is everything I need. Her first steps were in the living room by the bookshelf. Her first big cry was on the kitchen floor over a broken toy. Her first broken heart happened on our front porch, the boy standing in the yard while she cried into my sweater. We built a life in that house. Not perfect but good. We fixed the roof ourselves when water came through in 1989. Painted the bedroom green after Robert lost his job to remind us that hope still existed. Planted roses by the back fence the spring after my father died because I needed something beautiful to see through the window. The years moved forward. Sarah went to college. Robert died. I stayed. I stayed because leaving felt like abandoning something holy. Not just the wood and bricks, but the invisible heaviness of memory. The way the floor squeaked in exactly the right spot. The small dent in the hallway wall from when Robert tried to bring in a new dresser. The carved letters on the porch railing that Sarah thought I didn't know about. There were offers, of course. Over the years, people selling houses left cards in my mailbox. Great opportunity, perfect location. One even dared to call during dinner, but I always said no. I didn't want a different house. I didn't want new features or open spaces. I wanted the house where I held my husband during his last months. The house where I taught Sunday school at the kitchen table. The house where I knew every sound and shadow by heart. Sarah never understood that. She used to visit more in her 20s. She'd bring wine, sit on the couch, take off her shoes and talk about work. But then the visits got shorter. Then they stopped completely. Phone, to watch men in polished shoes walk through the rooms I once cleaned on my hands and knees and say, the structure is good, but it needs everything redone. Nobody saw the bones of that house like I did. I knew where the wood was soft and where it was strong. I knew which step made noise when you walked on it and how to open the kitchen window so the breeze felt perfect in August. I knew which part of the counter Robert always leaned on, leaving a worn spot in the surface. None of that mattered to them, but it mattered to me. The day I learned about the auction, I sat in the living room for hours, just breathing, listening. The quiet of the house felt different that day. Tense, watching me as if it too had heard the news and was waiting for my answer. I stood up, walked to the corner where Robert's chair used to sit, and put my hand on the empty space. Don't worry, I whispered. I'm not letting them take you away. I wasn't sure if I meant Robert or the house or something else entirely. That evening, I pulled out the folder marked important papers. The one I hadn't opened since the year after Robert died. It held everything. House papers, insurance, a safety box key, and the small notebook I'd kept for 30 years. Every time I took money from savings, every time I gave Sarah money, I wrote it down. I turned to the last page. There was still enough, maybe not to beat a big company, but enough to make noise, to make them see me, to say, I was here. Built this. You don't get to erase me with a hammer. Not without a fight. Sarah wasn't always like this. There were years, fuzzy, warm years, when she held onto my dress at school and cried if I even looked at the door. When she'd curl up next to me on the couch, her tiny hand holding mine, whispering secrets about butterflies and monsters under her bed. She used to call me Mommy in a voice so gentle it could break my heart for days. That little girl was gone, replaced by a woman with sharp red lipstick and sharper words. I still remember the exact moment I realized she had left and someone else had taken her place. It wasn't a big fight or dramatic moment. No, it was quiet. That's what made it hurt so deep. It was 6 years ago on a Wednesday. She came over to help with paperwork, or so she said. I'd asked her to look at some health insurance forms. Robert always handled those things, and after he died, the numbers started swimming on the page. Sarah sat at the table with her silver laptop open, typing and clicking with quick movements, barely looking up. Mom, she said suddenly without warning. You should really think about selling. I stopped stirring my coffee. Selling what? The house. I thought I heard wrong. She sighed heavily. It's too much for you. You're living alone in 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms, and a yard the size of a football field. Doesn't make sense. And honestly, it's not safe. If the word hung there like smoke. She always hid behind safety, convenience, what was smart, what was best. I told her I wasn't interested, that the house was fine, that I had my routines, my way of doing things. But I saw it then, the look, that pinched expression that said, "Here we go again." My stubborn, old-fashioned, impossible mother. She didn't argue. She just closed her laptop and said, "We'll talk about this again later." And she did. Every holiday, every phone call, every awkward lunch at that expensive restaurant she liked, she'd bring it back to the same thing. When are you going to downsize? Wouldn't you like something modern? Have you looked at Sunset Gardens? They have heated floors and a book club. First I thought she was just worried. But over time, her worry began to sound like irritation. And then there were the favors. They started small. Few hundred for car repairs. Then it was help with the down payment on their new house. Then the dance classes for Emma, her daughter. Always with a promise to pay me back, though money never returned. Still I gave. That's what mothers do, right? We give and give and give until we're empty shells smiling politely in the corner, hoping someone remembers we used to matter. When she brought the legal papers, it was disguised as caring. In case of emergency, she said. Just back up. You don't even need to think about it. I should have asked more questions. I should have had someone else read it. But I signed. I trusted her. That trust ended the day I found my house in an auction catalog. I didn't yell when I called her. I didn't cry. But something in my voice must have changed because she responded like I was being unreasonable. Like I was standing in the way of progress. Mom, you're being emotional. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone. She said it so easily, as if I wasn't part of that word. She didn't think I'd fight back. She thought I'd fold just like always, nod and smile and go back to my sewing while they took apart my life one piece at a time. But something in me, something old and quiet and fierce woke up. You don't get to erase me. That night I sat in the kitchen, the same chair Robert always used, and made a list, not of complaints, though I could have filled pages, but of things I remembered, the things Sarah had forgotten or chosen to forget. How she cried when her first boyfriend broke her heart and I made her hot chocolate at midnight. How I stayed up all night sewing her costume the year she wanted to be a butterfly for Halloween. How I drove 8 hours through a thunderstorm when Emma was born because Sarah was too scared to be alone. I wasn't just a name on house papers. I was the hands that held her, the voice that comforted her, the roof that protected her. But now I was just property. A week before the auction I called Emma. My granddaughter is 25 now, lives 3 states away, but she still sends funny cards with little drawings in the corners. Still calls me Grammy like she's 7. She answered immediately. Grammy. Smiled. Hi, sweetheart. You okay? You sound different. Pause. I just wanted to hear your voice. We talked for 20 minutes about her job, her new puppy, a movie she thought I'd enjoy. She didn't know about the auction. I didn't tell her. Some betrayals are too heavy to pass to the next generation. After we hung up, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to raise my paddle. Not to win, not necessarily, but to remind them I was still here and I wasn't disappearing quietly. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the way Sarah tried to convince herself she hadn't done anything wrong. The morning after our phone call, the one where she told me, calm as anything, that selling my house was already happening, I found a big envelope in the mailbox, a thick one. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting on the front. For your review. Inside were 4 colorful brochures. Sunset Gardens. Retirement Reimagined. Valley View Heights. Peaceful Living for Independent Seniors. Cedar Grove Community. Where comfort meets care. I flipped through them in silence. Happy stock photos of gray-haired people playing cards and drinking tea on sunny patios. Everything clean, white, too bright. Everyone smiling like they'd never lost a single thing in their lives. One page showed a floor plan, a studio apartment smaller than my laundry room. It showed a tiny couch, a mini kitchen, a single bed in the corner. No dining room, no wall long enough to hang the family quilt. On the last page of one brochure, someone had circled a line in blue pen. Small garden plots available upon request. Plot, not a yard, not a tree to sit under, just a plot. I placed the brochures on the counter, one next to the other, and stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. Then I folded them neatly and dropped them into the garbage can. Lunch, Sarah called again. I just want to make sure you had time to look at those choices. She said it like she was reminding me to try the fish special at a restaurant. I did, I said. And they're not for me. She sighed. That heavy, dramatic sigh that people use when they want to seem patient but are actually boiling with anger. Mom, we've been through this. No, I corrected her. You've decided. We haven't talked about anything. There was a pause. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead I reached for my coffee and said, no, dear. You are. She hung up not long after. Said she had a meeting. Promised we'd talk soon, but I knew we wouldn't. That night I couldn't sleep. My head pounded with a dull ache like my brain was pushing against the inside of my skull trying to get out. I paced, touched the arm of the couch, ran my fingers over the piano keys, dusty and silent, sat at the kitchen table until the sunrise crept between the curtains and lit up the dust in the air like tiny gold pieces. I called the lawyer at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. His name was Thomas Wilson. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s, with gentle eyes and a wedding ring he turned when he was thinking. I'd chosen him because he came highly recommended by Helen Parker, a friend from church who recently made her own legal trust. Thomas listened carefully as I told him everything about the legal papers, the auction, the brochures, my daughter. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, took notes, occasionally raised an eyebrow. When I finished, he leaned back and said, Mrs. Roberts, I'm going to be honest. This isn't uncommon, but it is wrong. Depending on how the legal papers were written and when they were used, we may have options. Can I stop the sale? Yes. Possibly, but we'd have to act quickly. Once it goes through the public auction system, it'll be harder to undo. What if I just buy it myself? He looked surprised, then smiled. You could. That would certainly send a message. He nodded. I want to send one. He walked me through the legal steps, what I'd need to do at the bank, how to stop any money moves tied to the legal papers, how to officially cancel them. We wrote up the paperwork together. He didn't question my choice. He didn't talk down to me. He treated me like a client, a person. That was more respect than I'd gotten from my own daughter in years. Afterward, I went straight to the bank. My branch manager, Patricia, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who wore crisp blazers and remembered everyone's name. She greeted me warmly, sat me in her glass-walled office, and listened without blinking as I explained. Do you want me to freeze the account access under her name? She asked. And redirect all notifications to you. Her fingers flew over the computer keyboard. Done. That was it. No fireworks, no thunder. Just a quiet moment in a quiet office where a woman finally said, no more. I walked out of the bank and into the bright afternoon sunshine, feeling taller somehow. Not stronger, not yet, but steadier. Like my backbone remembered how to hold itself up again. That night, I took out a small notebook I hadn't opened in years. It was purple, leather-bound, a birthday gift from Robert on my 65th. I used to write memories in it. Little things. The first time Emma said Grammy. What Sarah looked like on her wedding day. The way Robert's hand always found mine under the dinner table. I flipped to a blank page. October 15th. Today I stopped being scared. Today I said no, and tomorrow I'll go to the auction. It was Emma who told me the exact time and place. Not on purpose. She called the night before the auction, cheerful as always, talking about her new apartment and the strange neighbor who plays music at 3 in the morning. And oh, Mom says she's taking tomorrow off for something important. Big family business. Some kind of signing, I think. She was vague. What kind of signing? I asked, try and keep my voice normal. Don't know, Emma said lightly. She and Mike were arguing about parking or something. You know them. Anyway, I think she's going downtown. I offered to watch Buddy, but they said they'd only be gone a couple hours. She mentioned a courthouse or maybe the city building. That was enough. She didn't know. Sarah hadn't told her what she was doing. I almost felt grateful for that. After we hung up, I sat at the dining room table for a long time. The house was quiet. My cup of coffee had gone cold. Outside, the streetlight flickered like it always did after 11 p.m. I imagined her signing papers in a crisp blazer, hair perfect, pen moving over the lines that would give my home to a stranger. I pictured her laughing at some joke Mike made. Maybe saying something like, well, it's just a building. She'll get used to it. But I wouldn't. I knew that now. I thought about not going, letting it happen, letting her carry the weight of what she'd done, letting silence be my final answer. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. At 7 the next morning, I dressed carefully. Blue dress, the one with the simple lines and the tiny pearl buttons. The same dress I wore to Robert's retirement party. The same one I wore when Sarah won her first spelling bee. The same one I almost gave away but kept. I pinned my hair back, added a touch of lipstick, not for them, for me. And I packed a folder. Bank papers, identification, a letter from the lawyer just in case. I wasn't going there to make a scene. I was going to be present, to stand in my truth. The auction hall was in the old city building on Oak Street. I hadn't been there in years. Not since Emma's high school graduation when they held the ceremony in the same room. It looked smaller now, folding chairs in rows, a podium at the front, a projector screen glowing softly with the word Springfield Estate Sale, 2 p.m. I walked in, heart steady, and then I saw her. Sarah, sitting in the front row, her tablet in one hand, phone in the other, Mike beside her, flipping through a catalog. They were whispering, smiling, confident, comfortable. She didn't notice me at first. I found a seat in the 6th row, set my folder on my lap, crossed my ankles and waited. More people came in. A few in suits, a couple that looked like house flippers, cheap shoes, quiet chatter. An older man with a notepad and a real estate badge clipped to his shirt. Then the auctioneer stepped forward. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin shortly. Please make sure you've signed in and picked up your paddles. I held mine in both hands. The room settled down. And then Sarah turned around, saw me. Eyes met. I didn't move. I just sat there straight-backed, calm, ready. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her feel, finally, what it was like to be seen. There's a particular kind of silence that happens just before a public auction begins. It's not the silence of respect or nervousness. It's the silence of calculation. People look at each other sideways, mentally measuring wallets, confidence, territory. I'd never been in a room like that before. But I recognized the energy. It was the same one I used to feel in the PTA meetings when Sarah was in elementary school. The mothers all subtly competing, pretending they weren't fighting while doing exactly that. The auctioneer, a man in his 60s with a tan too orange to be natural, cleared his throat into the microphone. Let's get started. Item number 1. My house was item number 12. I listened carefully, not to the items but to the people. One man always started the bidding. A woman in the 3rd row always bid after him. The flippers at the back barely moved but wrote things down frantically. Sarah didn't raise her paddle once. For the first 11 items she just watched. She wasn't here for anything else, only the house. She was waiting. When they reached item number 12 I felt a change. Breath held. The auctioneer looked at his notes. Next up, item 12. A 4-bedroom, 2-bath home on Maple Street. Great Bones, prime neighborhood. Property has been cleared for quick transfer. Shall we start the bidding at $150,000? Sarah's hand moved instantly. Paddle up. Her number 47. 155. The auctioneer nodded. Do I hear 160? Another paddle shot up. Someone behind me. Sarah's head turned sharply. She wasn't expecting competition. Thank you, the auctioneer said. 160. Do I hear 165? There was a pause, and I raised my paddle. Not fast, not timid, just steady, deliberate. The room didn't gasp. Life isn't a movie, but there was definitely a ripple. Heads turned. Sarah did a full double take. I looked her straight in the eye. She blinked, then narrowed her eyes like she thought she must be seeing things. The auctioneer glanced down. Paddle 23. 165. Do I hear 170? Sarah raised her paddle again, her lips pressed tight. 170. I raised mine again. 175. Now there were whispers. Someone leaned toward their neighbor and said something quietly. I didn't care. I wasn't bidding to win. I was bidding because it was mine. Because they needed to know I hadn't given up my voice just because I'd gotten quiet over the years. Sarah turned to Mike, whispered sharply. He shook his head. She looked forward again. 180, she said under her breath, raising her paddle. 180 to number 47. Do I hear 185? I didn't move. Not yet. Let her sweat. The auctioneer looked around. 180 going once. I raised my paddle slowly. 185, Sarah's face turned red. I could see the color rising up her neck. She raised again. 190. The auctioneer seemed amused. Now we have a real contest here, folks. I raised again. 195. My voice was calm. My hands weren't shaking. This wasn't about money. Not for me. Sarah stood up, the only person in the room on her feet. Excuse me, she said loudly. I'd like to speak with the auctioneer, please. He looked startled. Ma'am, we're in the middle of bidding. I understand, she said through gritted teeth. But I believe there's a confusion. That woman, she pointed at me, is my mother. She doesn't have the right. Actually, I do. My voice didn't boom, but it cut through the room like a knife through butter. Everyone turned. I stood slowly. From my bag I pulled out a folder. Legal cancellation of power of attorney, signed and notarized, effective as of 4 days ago, filed with the county clerk and attached to the title. Sarah froze. The auctioneer stepped down from the platform, took the folder, looked through the papers. He glanced up at me, then at Sarah. This changes things, he said quietly. Sarah's mouth opened, closed. Her face was a storm of disbelief, confusion, anger. Mom, she said almost a hiss. What are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago, I said. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just a long, loaded silence. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Given this new information, we'll need to pause the sale of item number 12. Please take a brief break while we verify legal documents. People stood up, talked in hushed voices. Some stared at me, some stared at her. Sarah turned back to Mike. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I sat back down, calm, certain. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to take back my life. She followed me out into the hallway like I knew she would. The auctioneer had called a 20-minute break, giving everyone time to stretch their legs and, in his words, gather clarity. The air outside the bidding room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper, one of those government buildings that had been scrubbed 1,000 times and never quite lost the scent of old files and aging tile. Mom, Sarah said sharply, heels clicking behind me. What the hell are you doing? Turn slowly. She stood 15 feet away, arms crossed, chin lifted like she always did when she wanted to seem taller than she was. I'm stopping you, I said plainly. From what? From stealing my house. She scoffed. You're being dramatic. No, I replied. You are. You just didn't think I'd notice. Her mouth opened, but I raised a hand. Don't, I said. Not now. I gave you years to speak, years to say something honest. Now you listen. She hesitated, clearly torn between storming off and doubling down. She chose the second. You don't know what you're doing, she said. You're letting your emotions get in the way of what's smart. No, I said again quietly. I'm finally letting my emotions speak. After a lifetime of making everything convenient for you. She rolled her eyes. It's not about convenience. Isn't it? Yes. Then what was that packet you mailed? Sunset Gardens, Cedar Grove, plots painted like homes. Her cheeks colored. You need care. I need honesty, I said. And respect. Sarah looked around as if checking to see who might be watching. Then she stepped closer. This is embarrassing, she hissed. You showing up here like this, making a scene. I haven't raised my voice once, I said calmly. You're embarrassed because for the first time in years, you can't control the story. She flinched. I never meant to hurt you, she muttered. But you did. Her eyes met mine then. It's not about need. It's about choice, about dignity. She stared at me, jaw tight. You'd really rather spend your savings just to make a point? No, I said softly. I'd rather not have to. I'd rather my daughter saw me as a person, not a problem to solve. But here we are. There was a pause, long and painful. You're being spiteful, she finally said. And you're being small, I replied. She blinked. If I'm spiteful, I added, I learned it from the silence I've been swallowing for decades. Her eyes filled with something. Anger maybe, or fear or shame. I didn't push. We stood there. Two women bound by blood and disappointment. The hallway between us filled with years we couldn't rewrite. I have to get back inside, I said at last. I'll fight it, she said. Half a threat, half a question. You can try, I said, my voice calm. But you won't win. I walked past her then, the smell of her perfume lingering, familiar and distant all at once. For a moment I thought she might reach out, grab my sleeve, say something real. She didn't. Back inside, the auctioneer was shuffling his notes, murmuring into his headset. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Mike sat in the front row, hunched and frowning as if trying to disappear. I returned to my seat. My folder still lay neatly in my lap. When the auctioneer looked up, his eyes met mine. He gave a tiny nod. Item 12, he said, voice regaining its rhythm. We are postponing the sale, pending legal review of ownership rights. At this time, the property is no longer available for bidding. Few people grumbled. One man stood and left. Someone else muttered, knew this would get complicated. I sat very still. It was done. Not won, not celebrated, but stopped. And that was enough for today. The auction wrapped up 40 minutes later. No one looked at me as they left, but I could feel the stares brushing past. Curious, cautious, occasionally pitying. I didn't mind. I wasn't there for them. Sarah didn't return to the room. I saw Mike leave alone, walking quickly, shoulders tight, phone pressed to his ear. I imagined the conversation. Something clipped, tense, full of sharp corners. I didn't envy him. I didn't hate him either. He was just a man who let himself believe the path of least resistance was always the smartest one. A lot of people do. When the room emptied, I remained in my seat. I needed a moment. Not to rest exactly, but to sit with what had happened, to feel it, not just survive it. The auctioneer approached, folding his clipboard under one arm. Mrs. Roberts, he said gently. Miss, I corrected him. I never changed it back. He smiled, nodded. Miss Roberts, I reviewed the paperwork with our legal consultant. Everything's in order. The cancellation stands. And with no valid power of attorney in effect, your property cannot be sold without your explicit consent. No. I imagine this hasn't been an easy day. No, I said, but it was a necessary one. He hesitated. I've seen a lot of families come through here. Most don't say a word. Just sign, nod, move on. But what you did today. He shook his head slightly. Mattered. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. He left me with a quiet nod, and I sat a while longer, hands resting on the folder in my lap. I had won something, though it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing alone in the middle of a once crowded room, finally holding your ground, only to realize how much space silence can take up. When I stepped outside, the sun had shifted. Late afternoon light, softer than before, filtered through the branches of the elm trees lining Oak Street. I walked slowly to the parking lot. And there she was. Sarah, leaning against her car, arms folded, sunglasses pushed up on her head like she'd forgotten they were there. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not outwardly. She looked tired. Done. She asked. Yes, I said. I thought maybe you'd leave through the back door. I don't use side exits anymore." That brought the faintest twitch to her lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "I didn't think you'd actually show up," she admitted after a pause. "That was the idea, wasn't it?" said. "Count on me," fading quietly. She didn't argue. "I told myself I was helping," she said eventually. "Doing the responsible thing, planning ahead." "You were planning for your convenience." "Maybe," she admitted, "but I also thought you wouldn't fight it, that maybe you'd even be relieved." I looked at her for a long moment. "You stopped asking me what I wanted a long time ago." Her face tightened. "You stopped telling me." I hadn't expected that. And for a second, I saw her not as the woman who'd tried to erase me from my own home, but as the child I once raised, still looking for an explanation, still waiting for something soft. "Maybe we both forgot how to talk," I said quietly. Sarah looked away. "It's easier to make decisions when you pretend the other person won't argue. It's easier to pretend love looks like protection, even when it's control." She nodded slowly. "So now what?" "Go home," I said. "And you decide what kind of daughter you want to be next." She flinched but didn't walk away. "I'm not asking for money," I added. "Not for visits, not even for apologies. I just want you to stop managing me." Sarah exhaled. "You always made it so easy to step in." "That's what mothers do," I said. "Until one day they can't or won't." We stood in silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Finally she stepped aside. "Let me know when you get home." I met her gaze. "Why?" "So I know you're safe." It wasn't enough, but it was something. I nodded once, got into my car and drove home. The gate creaked like it always had. A small sound, metal against metal, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to me it was a kind of welcome. My house had a language of its own. That soft groan of the porch steps. The tick of the hallway clock that was never quite right. The faint whistle of wind against the upstairs window when the weather changed. I knew them all. I'd memorized them without meaning to, like the lines on my own palms. I stepped through the front door and closed it gently behind me. I hadn't realized how deeply I'd braced myself until I was back in that quiet space. Until I felt the weight between my shoulder blades begin to ease, like a breath I'd been holding for too long finally released itself. The living room looked just as I'd left it. Of course it did. No one else had been here. But something had changed. Not the furniture or the pictures or the soft black. I hadn't touched them since the day I'd gone to the lawyer. I opened the folder now and laid the documents out like a small ceremony. The cancellation of power of attorney, the notice of asset protection, the pending trust account still waiting on a final signature. And then the paper that meant the most to me. A revised will. My old will had been written 15 years ago. Robert had still been alive then. Everything was to go to Sarah with small mentions of Emma tucked at the bottom. Now things were different. I had left the house to Emma. Not out of revenge. Not to spite her mother, but because Emma still called, still sent postcards, still said I love you without wanting anything in return. He saw me. That was enough. The rest of my savings I divided. Some for Emma, some for a children's fund at the local library, and a portion for myself, structured so that no one, no matter how close, could access it on my behalf again. It wasn't about money. It was about peace. I gathered the papers, returned them to the folder, and slid it into the bottom drawer of the secretary desk. Locked it. Then I picked up the phone. Emma answered on the second ring. "Grammy," she said. "You okay?" I said, smiling. "I just got home." "Was it awful?" "It was necessary." She paused, then lowered her voice. "Mom's not talking at all. She came home, slammed the door, went upstairs." Mike looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't comment. "I don't know what happened," Emma said. "But whatever it was, I think it shook her." "Should," I said gently. "She didn't tell me anything. I just knew something was wrong. She tried to sell the house, Emma, without telling me, without asking." The silence on the other end of the line went dense. Oh my God. She thought I'd accept it, that I'd be quiet. "What did you do?" I showed up. Another pause. "You're such a badass," Emma said. I laughed loudly, freely. That's not the word I'd use. It's the one I'm using, she said. Seriously, I'm proud of you. That made me quiet for a moment, not because I didn't believe her, but because I realized I hadn't heard those words in so long, not from anyone. Thank you, I said. Can I come visit this weekend? Please do. I'll bring cookies. You always say that. And this time I mean it. We said our goodbyes and I hung up. Outside, the sky was turning a dusky pink and the oak tree out front swayed gently in the breeze. I stood at the window, watching the leaves shift and shimmer. It wasn't over. There would still be conversations, tension, unspoken things sitting heavy in the corners of rooms. But the house was mine again. And more importantly, so was I. Took her 4 days to call. Longer than I expected, honestly. I thought she might show up on my porch that same evening, furious or tearful or both. But Sarah didn't like messy scenes. She preferred control, order, private conversations where she could steer the story. And I think for once, she didn't know which story to tell. When my phone finally rang, I was in the garden pulling up the last of the summer basil before it turned bitter. The screen flashed her name and for a moment I just watched it buzz. No part of me rushed to answer. I finished what I was doing, wiped my hands on my apron, and only then picked it up. Hello. Pause, then hi Mom. Her voice was different, flat, cautious. I didn't think you'd answer. You thought right. She sighed. Look, I know things got complicated. They didn't get complicated, I said. You made a choice and I responded to it. Another pause. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Yes, you did. She bristled. I could hear it in the breath she didn't take. You don't know what it's like, she said suddenly, trying to juggle everything. Work, family, the constant pressure to keep everyone happy. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to make things easier. For whom? Her silence was the only answer I needed. I sat on the back porch step, phone to my ear, the garden still fragrant with damp earth and basil. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's wind chime offered a soft, uncertain melody. You stopped seeing me as a person, I said. I became a project, a liability, something to handle. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked quietly. More silence. I know I didn't ask for help often, I said. I let you think I was fine when I wasn't. I swallowed a lot to keep the peace, but there's a difference between independence and invisibility. I never thought you were invisible. No, I said, you just acted like I had no voice left. She exhaled long and weary. I thought I was doing what Dad would have wanted. That caught me off guard. For a heartbeat, I forgot I was angry. What your father would have wanted, I repeated slowly, was for his daughter to treat her mother like someone with a mind and a heart. Not like a puzzle to be solved. He hated seeing you struggle and I hated watching him die, I snapped. But I stayed. I didn't rearrange his life while he was sleeping. I hadn't planned to say that, but once it came out, I didn't regret it. Sarah didn't reply. I could hear her breathing, just that. I didn't do this to shame you, I said. I did it because I refused to be erased. No. Waited. I'm sorry, she added finally. And it wasn't much, but it didn't sound rehearsed. Good, I said. Now act like it. She let out a soft laugh. Surprised, maybe a little wounded. I'm not giving the house back to you if that's what you're calling about. No. Changed the will. She was quiet. Emma gets it, I said. And I'm moving my savings to a protected account. No one gets to touch it unless I say so. Get it? I don't think you do, I said more gently this time. But maybe you will. She cleared her throat. Emma told me you're having her over this weekend. She's closer to you than she is to me sometimes. That's not an accident. I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it because it was true. You can come too if you like, I added after a moment. If you're ready to listen, not manage. Sarah didn't answer right away. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I ask. We ended the call, not as friends, not as mother and daughter the way we used to be, but as two women who understood that something had been broken and that it might never return to its original shape. But maybe, just maybe, something else could be built in its place. I stood, brushed dirt from my knees, and went back to the garden. Emma arrived Saturday afternoon. arms full of bags and face glowing like she'd just stepped out of sunshine. It had been raining all morning, that quiet kind of autumn rain that taps softly on the roof and smells of old leaves and damp earth. But when I opened the door, she brought warmth with her. "Don't panic," she said, stepping inside. "I brought cookies and not store-bought this time. Swear." "I'll believe it when I taste it," I said, smiling. She didn't defend it," Emma said quickly. She looked tired. "I think she's scared, Grammy. Of you. Of what it means now that you said no." I sipped my tea. "I've said no before. Not like this." I didn't argue. "She's not evil," Emma added. "She's just so used to being in charge. And when people like that lose control, they panic. She had no right." No. That was enough. I didn't need Emma to take sides. I didn't want her to. "I changed the will," I said gently. "I hope that doesn't put you in a difficult position." She shook her head. "It's not about the will." I studied her for a moment. "You're a lot braver than I was at your age." She grinned. "You don't know what I'm afraid of. But you show up anyway," I said. "That's the part that counts." The cookies, by the way, were wonderful. Crisp edges, soft centers, just enough chocolate chips. We talked for hours about books, about her job, about the guy she was seeing whom she described as mostly tolerable. Except when he tries to make smoothies at 6 a.m. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in weeks. As we cleared the table, I saw her glance out the window. "Is someone coming?" "Yes." She hesitated. "Mom texted me this morning, said she might stop by." I felt the stillness settle back into the room. Not tension exactly, just the awareness of possibility. "I didn't invite her," Emma added quickly. "But I didn't tell her not to come either." I nodded, and then, like clockwork, the doorbell rang. We stood in the kitchen, silent. I looked at Emma. She looked at me. "You don't have to open it," she said. But I already was walking. Sarah stood on the porch in a long coat, her hair pulled back, a white envelope in one hand. "I won't stay," she said immediately. I had to give this to you in person." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. She held the envelope out. "It's the final signature for the trust transfer. I had my lawyer sign off." I took it without a word. "And I canceled the secondary access," she added. "I had no business on your accounts." "No," I said, "you didn't." She nodded, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "But I want you to know I'm trying. Trying, not fixing, not pleading, just that." I stepped back from the door. "You can come in," I said quietly, "but only as a guest." Sarah hesitated, then stepped inside. She didn't ask where to sit. She didn't reach for anything. She moved slowly, like someone entering sacred ground they hadn't earned the right to walk. Emma joined us in the living room, handed her a cup of tea without a word, and for the first time in years, the three of us sat in the same room. Not as family in a holiday photo, not as roles we'd been assigned, but as women, each carrying her own damage, her own choices, her own grief. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was something quieter, more fragile. A beginning. She didn't stay long. Sarah sat on the edge of the living room armchair, legs crossed, hands folded too carefully in her lap, like she didn't know what to do with herself in this house anymore. She accepted a cup of tea from Emma with a quiet thank you and barely sipped it. I watched her eyes move across the room. The fireplace mantel, the framed photographs, the quilt over the back of the couch. Her gaze lingered on a photo of Robert holding Emma as a toddler. Both of them mid-laugh. "This place hasn't changed," she said almost to herself. "It didn't need to," I answered. She looked at me then, not sharply, not defensively. "Just look. I used to think that meant you were stuck," she said. "That you were afraid to move forward. And now I think maybe I didn't want to see what you were holding together here, because if I saw it, I'd have to admit I was letting go of something too quickly." Emma shifted in her seat but said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt. Sarah set her tea down. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom." "I'm not offering it," I replied. "Not today." She nodded. "Fair." But she didn't get up to leave. She stayed, awkward in her stillness, as if waiting for something neither of us knew how to name. I thought of all the times I had held my tongue for her sake, The years I had made myself smaller to avoid her disappointment, her opinions, her thinly veiled corrections. I remembered the birthdays where she showed up late, the holidays where her smile was tight with obligation. I remembered too the way she used to cling to my arm as a child in crowded stores. The way she once wept when I left her at college. We were not just mother and daughter. We were a long series of choices. Some tender, some careless. "I don't want the house," she said suddenly. "I never did really. I think I wanted control because you always felt out of reach. 'Cause I stopped letting you run my life. 'Cause I never understood how you could live so quietly, so completely without needing more." Sat back. Quiet isn't the same as small or weak. You mistake stillness for absence. She looked at her hands. "I was afraid of becoming you," she admitted. "Afraid of staying in one place and watching everything else move on without me." "You were afraid of staying," I said. "And I was afraid of leaving. We built opposite lives. And now I'm not afraid." She blinked at that, looked down again. "I don't know what to do with the space between us." "You don't have to do anything with it," I said. "You just have to stop pretending it's not there." That silence again, not angry, not even sad. Just full of things we hadn't said and maybe never would. She stood finally. "I'm going to go," she said. "But I'd like to come back. Not to manage, just to visit if that's allowed." He nodded. "It is, on my terms." She didn't argue. Emma walked her to the door. I didn't follow. I listened to the soft exchange between them. No raised voices, no tension, just the sound of goodbye. When Emma returned, she carried the teacup Sarah had barely touched. She rinsed it without a word. "Do you think she'll mean it?" she asked finally. "About coming back?" "Think she's trying." "That doesn't fix it." "No," I said, "but it's a beginning." We sat together for a while after that. No noise but the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath our chairs and the rustle of wind through the trees outside. "You okay, Grammy?" Emma asked. I took a moment before answering. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a long time I think I am." The next few weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. Sarah didn't visit again right away, but she called once, just once. It was a short conversation, stilted with long pauses, as if we were speaking through a fog neither of us could quite clear. But it was polite, cautious, civil. That was a beginning too. Meanwhile, I returned to my own life, the one I'd nearly let slip away under the weight of someone else's certainty. I started going back to the library again on Tuesday mornings. The ladies there always saved me the chair by the window, the one closest to the heating vent in winter. I spent long afternoons tending the yard. The roses, not because I needed the company but because I liked the exchange. Something warm passing from hand to hand. No expectations, no noise. Emma came by most weekends. She didn't always stay long. She had a life, a job, her own apartment filled with plants and chaos, but she always came. She brought stories, laughter, sometimes her laundry. I didn't mind. One Saturday she brought a book with her. "You should read this," she said, placing it gently on the coffee table. "The main character reminded me of you." I looked at the cover. A woman on a porch gazing out at an open field. "She doesn't do much," Emma added. "But somehow everything changes around her." Smiled. "Sounds familiar." We didn't talk about Sarah much. Sometimes Emma would mention something. An email, a conversation, a moment of frustration, but she never tried to explain her mother's choices. I appreciated that. It wasn't her burden to carry. Still, I knew she was watching both of us, quietly hoping. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping tea, she asked, "Do you miss her?" I didn't answer right away. "I miss what I thought we might have," I said. "But no, I don't miss being managed." "Do you think she'll ever change?" "She already has, just not in all the ways I wanted." "And that's okay." Emma nodded, thoughtful. "I think she's scared of becoming you." She told me that, but I think she's even more scared of ending up alone. "She's not alone," I said. "Not if she learns how to be honest." I didn't say it out of malice. I wasn't trying to sound wise or distant. It was just the truth. That evening after Emma left, I sat at the piano. It had been years since I'd played. My fingers moved slowly, uncertain at first, as if the keys were testing me back. But then something settled. Muscle memory maybe, or just a small, unexpected joy. The melody was simple, old, something Robert used to hum without realizing. I played until the light outside turned amber, then blue, then disappeared altogether. The room was quiet again. Not empty, never empty, but filled with a kind of peace I hadn't known I was still allowed to feel. And for the first time in months, I didn't think about what might be taken next. I thought about what I still had. The letter came in the middle of December. A simple envelope, no return address. Sarah's handwriting, neat, familiar, too formal. I sat at the kitchen table before opening it, the way I always had with her letters when she was younger. Back then they'd come from summer camp, from college, from early work trips. Little updates, scraps of her life sent home to be held. This one felt heavier. Inside, 2 pages, handwritten, not typed. The first line read, I didn't know how to say this aloud. I read it slowly. No part of me rushed. She didn't make excuses. That surprised me. She wrote about fear, about watching me age and not knowing what to do with it, about control as a reflex, a substitute for closeness. About how she'd convinced herself that taking charge was the same as showing care. I think I forgot that you had a life before I was born, she wrote. That you knew things long before I ever stood on my own feet. Somewhere along the way I stopped looking at you. I started managing you like a task. She wrote about the house, not just the sale but the memories. The walls where she'd hidden crayon drawings. The staircase where she once sat crying after her first breakup. The kitchen where I'd taught her how to crack an egg without getting shell in the bowl. I thought selling it would protect us from the mess of aging, she wrote. I see now it would have erased everything. There was no dramatic apology, just a quiet kind of reckoning. Near the end, she wrote, I understand if you don't want me back in your life the way things were. I only ask that if there's space, maybe we can build something new. Not mother and daughter the way we used to be. Just 2 women trying not to disappear. I folded the letter carefully, smoothed the creases, set it on the table, and stared at it while the kettle warmed. She hadn't asked for forgiveness, and I respected her for that. What she offered wasn't a fix. It was a door cracked open, an invitation without pressure. That evening I walked the yard, bundled in my coat, hands in my pockets. The leaves were nearly gone now. Bare branches reached into a sky the color of ash. The cold made everything quiet in a different way. Not like summer's peace, but like winter's pause. A stillness before change. I thought about how long I'd carried the silence between us. How much weight that silence had gathered over the years. Every missed birthday call. Every unspoken hurt. Every sigh I'd swallowed. And how one letter, 2 pages, had begun to loosen its hold. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if we'd ever be what people called close. But I knew one thing, she saw me now. Not just as a mother. Not as a woman in a house she no longer understood. But as a person with boundaries, with breath. That was something. The next morning I wrote her back. Just 1 page. I told her I got the letter, that I believed her, that I was willing to try. Not to forget, not to return, but to begin again from where we were. Honest, equal, grown. And then I added, if you ever want to come back to the house, the door is open, but you walk through it as my guest, and you leave your clipboard at home. I signed it with just my name. No mom, no title. Then I slipped it into the envelope and mailed it. The air was cold on my cheeks when I stepped outside, but it didn't feel harsh. Felt clean. She came again in January. No warning, no fanfare. Just the sound of her car pulling into the drive. The low crunch of tires over cold gravel. I watched from the window as she stepped out, scarf wrapped tight, hands bare despite the wind. She had no bag, no clipboard, just a tin in her hands, silver with a red ribbon. I opened the door before she could knock. I brought chocolate chip cookies, she said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Of course you did, I said, and stepped aside. She entered quietly, removed her coat, took off her shoes. Every gesture careful, deliberate. She didn't ask where to sit this time. She waited. Yes. She nodded. Please. We moved through the motions. Boil, pour, steep, in companionable silence. The kind that used to belong to us before things got heavy, before control replaced conversation. In the living room, she set the tin on the table but didn't open it. "I read your letter 3 times," she said finally. "I didn't know one page could hold so much. You used to say the same thing about recipes." She smiled. "A small one but real. I didn't expect you to answer. You didn't burn them. I made 4 batches. We sat together and ate in silence. No lectures, no explanations, just the crunch of cookies, the comfort of shared time, and the slow repair of something long broken. She stayed an hour, didn't try to fill it, didn't try to fix anything. When she left, she didn't say, 'See you soon.' She said, 'Thank you for letting me in.' And I said, 'Thank you for coming as yourself.'" I stood at the window as she drove away, the silver tin tucked under her arm, now half empty. The house felt quiet again, but not hollow, just full of its own breath. After she left, I sat at the piano, played a few chords, just enough. And then I wrote, not to Sarah, not to Emma, but to myself. A page, maybe 2, about what it means to stay, to own your space, to speak when silence is easier, to begin again, even after the years have settled heavy in your chest. I placed the pages in the blue notebook. Then I poured another cup of tea. I didn't win anything in the traditional sense. There was no justice served, no confession broadcast to a courtroom, no grand gesture of reconciliation. But I kept my house, kept my name, kept my voice. And that, in the quiet accounting of a long life, is more than enough. If this story moved something in you, share it, tell someone, or simply sit with it for a while. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay exactly where you are and not apologize for it. If this resonated with you, leave a comment or send it to someone who needs it. There's power in being seen. Sometimes we think strength means being loud, making big gestures, or fighting with drama. But real strength can be quiet. It can be an old woman sitting in an auction room, raising her paddle not to win, but to say, "I am still here. I still matter. My voice still counts." We live in a world that often treats older people like they're invisible, like their opinions don't matter anymore, like their choices should be made for them by people who think they know better. But age doesn't erase your right to choose. Gray hair doesn't mean you've lost your voice. Living quietly doesn't mean you've given up your power. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. Sometimes love looks like letting go. But sometimes it looks like holding on. Sometimes it looks like a daughter making what she thinks are practical decisions. But sometimes it looks like a mother saying, "This is mine, and you don't get to take it just because you think you know what's best." The hardest part about family isn't the big fights or the dramatic moments. It's the slow erosion of respect, the gradual shift from seeing someone as a person to seeing them as a problem to be solved. It's the way love can disguise itself as control, the way concern can mask itself as dismissal. But it's also about second chances. About the possibility that even after years of misunderstanding, 2 people can find their way back to seeing each other clearly. Not as roles, not as burdens or managers, but as human beings with their own fears, their own needs, their own dignity. This story isn't just about a house. It's about the right to exist on your own terms. It's about refusing to be managed, dismissed, or erased by people who think they know better. It's about the quiet courage it takes to say no when everyone expects you to say yes. And it's about the possibility that even broken relationships can be rebuilt on a foundation of honest respect. So if you're the daughter in this story, take a moment to really see the person who raised you. Not as a problem to be solved or a responsibility to be managed, but as a human being with their own wisdom, their own choices, their own right to dignity. And if you're the mother, remember that your voice still matters. Your choices are still yours to make. You don't have to apologize for taking up space in your own life. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to matter. We're all just trying to be seen, to be heard, to leave some small mark that says, "I was here. I lived. Chose." And sometimes, the most powerful way to do that is simply by staying exactly where you are and refusing to let anyone else write the end of your story. Thank you for listening to Granny's Voice. Until next time, keep standing your ground.